John yearned for peace. He found solace in the cabin's isolation. Nestled deep within the woods, it promised respite. John initially felt calm. The cabin, weathered yet sturdy, stood as a beacon. It was a sanctuary against the world's chaos. John breathed deeply, the scent of pine filling him. He was finally alone. The first day passed in a blur of unpacking. John built a fire, the crackling flames a comforting presence. He cooked a simple meal, savoring the silence. As night fell, a blanket of stars emerged. John felt a sense of peace he hadn't realized he craved. The first few days passed without incident. The tranquility of the forest seemed to embrace John, offering a stark contrast to the chaos of his previous life. John settled into a routine, chopping wood, reading, exploring the woods. Each day followed a predictable pattern, and he found solace in the simplicity of his new life. The solitude, initially welcoming, began to feel oppressive. The vastness of the forest, once a source of wonder, now seemed to close in on him. The silence, once comforting, now buzzed in his ears. It was as if the quietness had a weight of its own, pressing down on him. One night, John woke with a start. His heart pounded in his chest, and he struggled to catch his breath. He felt a presence, a heaviness in the air. It was an inexplicable sensation, as though someone or something was watching him. He dismissed it as a nightmare, the remnants of a stressful life clinging on. But the feeling persisted. Each night, the sense of being watched grew stronger. Sleep became fitful, plagued by strange dreams. Vivid images of shadowy figures and whispering voices haunted his nights. The wind howled outside, mimicking the whispers he swore he heard in his waking hours. The once soothing sounds of nature now seemed sinister. John tried to rationalize his fear, but doubt gnawed at him. He questioned his sanity, wondering if the isolation was playing tricks on his mind. He was alone, utterly alone. The realization hit him hard, and the once peaceful cabin now felt like a prison, trapping him with his growing paranoia. Days grew colder. A perpetual mist clung to the woods, shrouding everything in an eerie silence. The once familiar forest felt alien. John's unease grew. One evening, while chopping wood, John heard it, a low growl, guttural and deep. It seemed to emanate from the woods, sending shivers down his spine. He dismissed it as his imagination. But the woods held their breath, an unnatural silence following the growl. That night, the whispers returned, louder this time. They slithered around the cabin, pronouncements in an unknown tongue. John lay awake, fear a cold fist squeezing his heart. He knew then, with chilling certainty, that he wasn't alone. The days that followed were torture. Each moment stretched into an eternity, filled with an unrelenting sense of dread. John was a prisoner in his haven. The cabin, once a place of solace, had become a cage, trapping him with his fears. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle outside the cabin walls, sent his heart racing. The sounds were amplified in the silence, each one a potential threat. He was being watched, hunted. The feeling of eyes on him was constant, an invisible predator lurking just out of sight. One afternoon John saw it, a fleeting glimpse of movement in the woods. It was quick, almost imperceptible but unmistakable. A shadow, too large to be human, darting behind a thicket of trees. His mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. He tried to convince himself it was a deer, a bear, anything but what his gut told him it was. Night brought fresh terror. The darkness seemed to come alive, filled with unseen threats. The growls were closer now, circling the cabin. They were low and guttural, sending shivers down his spine. John barricaded the doors, reinforced the windows. He used whatever he could find, determined to keep the terror at bay. He was desperately trying to fortify his sanctuary against an unseen terror. The sense of impending doom was overwhelming, and he knew he had to be prepared for whatever was out there. As the hours dragged on, John's anxiety grew. He paced the cabin, his mind racing with thoughts of what might come. The shadows outside seemed to move with a life of their own, taunting him. He could feel the presence drawing nearer, the air growing colder with each passing moment. His hands trembled as he tried to steady his nerves, knowing that the real test of his fortitude was yet to come. The storm hit that night. Rain lashed against the cabin, wind screaming through the trees. It was a symphony of chaos, mirroring the fear that clawed at John's sanity. He huddled in the corner, a knife clutched in his hand. The whispers were everywhere now, a cacophony of sound. Then silence, a deafening silence that was more terrifying than any storm. The door creaked open. Two eyes, glowing with malevolent intelligence, appeared in the doorway. The creature stepped in, its form a grotesque mockery of nature. John's breath caught in his throat. This was no nightmare, this was real. Panic threatened to consume John, but a primal instinct for survival kicked in. He scrambled back, the creature's putrid breath washing over him. It moved with a horrifying grace, its eyes never leaving him. John lunged, slashing wildly with the knife. The creature roared, the sound shaking the very foundation of the cabin. John's heart pounded, his blood turning to ice. He had to escape. The back door. It was a long shot, but it was his only hope. He threw himself towards it, the creature's guttural growl echoing behind him. The storm raged on as John burst through the back door. Rain soaked him instantly, the wind whipping his hair into his eyes. He didn't dare look back, the creature's enraged roar propelling him forward. The woods were a labyrinth in the darkness. Trees, transformed into menacing giants, reached out to grab him. John crashed through the undergrowth, his lungs burning. Fear lent him a burst of speed. He could hear the creature crashing through the undergrowth behind him, its heavy breaths a terrifying counterpoint to the storm's fury. John stumbled, falling into a muddy ditch. He struggled to his feet, his clothes heavy with water and mud. He looked around frantically, his heart pounding against his ribs. He was trapped. The creature emerged from the darkness, its eyes glowing with predatory hunger. It circled him slowly, savoring his terror. John felt a surge of despair. He closed his eyes, bracing himself for the inevitable, but the attack never came. He opened his eyes to see the creature staring past him, its attention drawn to something in the distance. John didn't hesitate. He scrambled up the muddy embankment, not daring to take his eyes off the creature. It was distracted, its focus on something beyond the tree line. He ran, his legs screaming in protest. The storm was abating, the first streaks of dawn painting the sky a bruised purple. He had to get back to his car, had to get away from this nightmare. He didn't dare look back, fear fueling his every step. The memory of the creature's eyes, the stench of its breath, spurred him on. John burst through the tree line, his lungs burning. The cabin was gone, swallowed by the woods. He stumbled towards the dirt road, relief washing over him as he saw his car in the distance. He fumbled for his keys, his hands shaking uncontrollably. He could still feel the creature's eyes on him, a tangible presence even from afar. He threw himself into the car, slamming the door shut. The engine roared to life, the sound deafening in the stillness of the dawning day. John sped away, leaving the cabin and the nightmare behind. The engine roared as he pressed the pedal to the floor, his heart pounding in his chest. Every shadow seemed to move, every rustle in the trees a reminder of what he was fleeing from. He didn't stop driving until he reached the highway, the familiar sights and sounds of civilization washing over him like a balm. The city lights flickered in the distance, a beacon of normalcy in the chaos of his mind. The hum of traffic was a comforting reminder that he was no longer alone in the dark. He had survived, but at a cost. His face, reflected in the rearview mirror, was a ghostly mask of exhaustion and fear. The lines etched into his skin told the story of a man who had seen too much, who had been pushed to the brink of sanity. The terror of that night remained, a chilling memory forever seared into his mind. The forest, with its twisted trees and eerie silence, haunted his dreams. He could still hear the whispers, the rustling leaves, the feeling of being watched. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that he would never be truly free of the woods and the creature that lurked within. The fear was a constant companion, a shadow that followed him wherever he went. He could feel its presence, lurking just out of sight, waiting for the moment to strike. The world seemed different now. The line between reality and nightmare blurred. The city, once a place of safety, now felt alien and strange. The fog that clung to the streets seemed to seep into his mind, clouding his thoughts and distorting his perception of reality. John had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had looked back. In that moment, he had seen something that had changed him forever. The darkness had a life of its own, a malevolent force that had reached out and touched his soul. And in its gaze he had seen a darkness that would haunt him for the rest of his days. The visions, the nightmares, they were a part of him now. He could feel the weight of them pressing down on him, a constant reminder of the price he had paid for survival.